Hi there, my name is Will, and today I'm going to walk you through how you can handle null and undefined values with the null coalescing operator. There's nothing worse than finding out that your workflow failed because it didn't know how to handle an undefined value or a null value. We can handle this using an expression and the null coalescing operator to be able to make our workflows more robust. Let's have a look. Inside of this workflow here, I have a variable here that's going to use an input, but as you can see, the input is not required, which means we might end up getting a null or undefined value here, and therefore our expression will fail. But using the null coalescing operator, which is these two question marks here, we can say that if this doesn't exist, this value is no longer available, we can then use this expression here called now that will get the current time, and it will put that instead. So this is really useful if you've got a scenario where you won't necessarily always get an input and you need to be able to guarantee that the flow won't fail just because it didn't receive some value. So when I execute this, we'll see that even though I have not filled out the input values, we're going to see that the flow is going to contain the current date, which is the 13th of December. In our next example, we can showcase two types of null coalescing operator. Now, the first one is using two question marks. And as you can see here in this example, we've got this expression here that says, if the input value here is not available, then resort to using the value on the right-hand side. But we can also use it with three question marks. Now, with the three question mark operator, this will allow us to return null values, but it will not return undefined. So for two question marks, that checks for undefined and null values, whereas three only checks for undefined. So perhaps you are happy to return a null value, but this is useful for being able to handle those scenarios where something's undefined and it doesn't know what to return, whereas at least a null value is still a value that you can return. Here's another example where I have a schedule trigger that when it executes, it will be able to put the trigger date that it was executed inside of this log. But what happens when I execute it manually? As you can see here, it comes up with a warning to let me know that trigger.date doesn't exist if you execute it manually. So what I should do here is instead put the null coalescing operator and then another value. Here I can simply put the now expression. So if I put execute, what we'll see here is it's going to put the current date. So another scenario where we're using triggers, this null coalescing operator can be very useful for being able to still be able to manually run your workflows for debugging purposes. Another example is using a webhook trigger where you're going to receive a body of data, but sometimes that body might not be what you expect. So here, if I was expecting this to get requested, I'm looking for a field in that body called data field. But if data field never arrives, then I need to be able to handle a scenario where that value might be null. So here I can easily just put a different value on the right-hand side of the operator to be returned instead. And this also works then for examples like now where I can execute it manually and it will still run. So hopefully that's going to help you handle null and undefined values inside of your workflows. Let us know in Slack how you're going to use this and make sure to give us a start on GitHub.